Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I thought it would be kind of fun to talk about my favorite books that I read in the first quarter of 2021. So in January, February, and March. I will link my wrap-up videos below, so if you want to hear other books that I have read so far this year, you can. But I saw Amanda at the Curly Reader do this and I was like, that is a great idea, because then that's going to be fun and easier for me to look back on at the end of the year to kind of help determine some of my favorite reads of this year. So some of these books are going to be ones that I read a while ago, and some of them are going to be ones that I just talked about recently. So if some of these are a little bit redundant because you have recently watched any of my March wrap-up videos, I'm sorry. They're kind of spread out. I have one from January, two from February, and two from March, I think. So I think I'm just gonna do the top 5 because that just seems like a good even number. And yeah, it's not an even number though. I just realized that it's an odd number. I homeschool my child, people. This is not good. But yeah, you know what I mean. 5 just seems like a good number. Okay, so my first one is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I read this book in January and oh my word, I loved it. It was my very first Shirley Jackson. I had heard some people talking about reading her recently. I think I heard about this particular book from Murphy Napier, but Chantel at An Intentional Life had been talking about some of Shirley Jackson's short stories. So this ended up being the first one that I started with. Shirley Jackson is, I think, more well known for her short stories, but We Have Always Lived in the Castle is a full novel. So this book is about a girl, Mary Catherine, also known as Mary Cat to her family, and she lives with her older sister Constance and her uncle Julian. And a few years prior to the beginning of the book, all of her family except for her sister and uncle had died because they were poisoned, basically at the dinner table. And Constance was arrested for it, but then acquitted. So the townspeople really do not like them at all, and they try to avoid going into town at all costs. And Shirley Jackson can really set this creepy atmosphere. I really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it like 4.5 stars because there are elements to the ending I didn't love, because I felt like the ending had like this big bang moment, and then like the last like 2 chapters seemed real tapered off, and I didn't love that about it. But kind of, it's one of those books that in hindsight I have continued to think about it and really enjoyed it, and I may even like go back and change it to a 5-star rating because it was really good. And it was my favorite book of January as well. So I highly recommend this book, especially if you like creepy, atmospheric books. And I think it's classified as a gothic thriller. So if you like those gothic feel type books, you will probably really enjoy this one. The next 2 books I have on here are both books that I read in February, and they are both books that made me cry, because if a book makes me cry, it's gonna be pretty high up on my list of books that I love. So the first one is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, and oh, I talked about this one at length in my February wrap-up video, so I will link that so you can check out, you know, more detailed thoughts about it. It's set in World War II in France, and it's following these 2 sisters, and a lot of people compare it to All the Light We Cannot See, and I've heard a lot of people say they liked All the Light We Cannot See better because they both follow the Germans invading France. But I read All the Light We Cannot See and didn't get the hype. Like, it was a fine book and I liked parts of it, but overall it was just kind of disappointed by it because everyone hyped it so much. But then there are a lot of people who hyped The Nightingale, so I was really concerned that I wasn't going to like it, but I absolutely loved it. So like I said, it follows these two sisters, and the two sisters are very, very different. So you've got the older sister, and she is also a mother to a child, a little girl who I think is probably like 6 to 8 when the story picks up. And then we've got the younger sister who has, I think, just turned 18. A little hazy on the details because it's been like 2 months since I've read this book. But they have completely different personalities. So the older sister is very much a rule follower, don't rock the boat. And so when the Germans come in and are taking over, she's like, we just need to submit to them and trust that you know, the French army is going to be able to take France back from Germany, that we'll get other people coming in to help, Americans, British people, whatever. We need to trust that is going to be okay, basically. And then the younger sister is like, no, I'm going to fight back. I'm going to do these things I'm not supposed to do, and I'm going to push back against them. And I liked the contrast between the two sisters, particularly because I think that when I was younger, I would have more related to the younger sister, but now that I'm a mother, a lot of the choices that the older sister makes are because she wants to protect her daughter. And so it really made, I don't know, it was very thought-provoking for me that it's so easy for us to say, if we lived in this certain time period, we would have done this, we would have fought against this. And I see a lot of people say that kind of stuff all the time, but this really caused me to think, like, what would I do if I was in that situation? It's easy to say when we're past this to be like, yes, I would have been on the right side of history, but when you sit down and think about if this was happening to you right now, to your family right now, what would you do? So it was a really beautiful book. It was really well written, so immersive. I finished it late at night when my husband was sitting next to me, well, laying next to me. He had fallen asleep, and I was like sobbing, trying to keep it quiet so I wouldn't wake him up. So this book was very like emotionally devastating for me, and I absolutely loved it. I will say that there is a trigger warning for sexual assault in it. It's not very detailed, so I was able to read it, and usually I kind of steer clear of that, but it is there. So if that is something that is particularly triggering to you, just know that going in. The second book in February that I absolutely loved and did make me cry was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, and oh my goodness. I think that everyone had read this book or seen this movie except for me. Like, I don't know how I missed never reading it or never seeing the movie. I still haven't seen the movie. And to be honest, at this point, I don't really care, because a lot of times movies take liberties and creative license from the book, and I do not do well with that. I just don't. Just ask my husband. This is why we can't watch movies based on beloved books dear to my heart. So anyway, so The Outsiders is about this boy, Pony Boy, and yes, that's his real name, like actually his name on his birth certificate. And his older brother's name is Soda Pop, which is ridiculous. So anyways, yes, so it is about this boy, Pony Boy, and his two brothers, Soda Pop and Daryl, and then a few other characters, and they're part of this gang called the Greasers. So they live in the more poor area of the town, and they are basically always having these fights and things going on with this other rival gang called the Socs, and they are people who are very wealthy. And so it was really good. I really liked it. I can't believe I found out that the author was only, I think, either 15 or 16 when she wrote this book, which is crazy because it is so well written, and I really enjoyed it and thought it had a really good commentary on the fact of society, basically, that having money and having things doesn't make you happy. That it's, you know, family and people and friends that really bring you joy, because the Socs are just like absolutely miserable and they have it all, and the Greasers think that they want that they want more money, more social standing, these things. They think that the socias have it so easy, and in some ways they do, but that struggle and search for satisfaction is not something that really any human being is immune to. So I just really enjoyed this book, and it did make me cry also. So the last two books that I want to mention are books that I read in March, and they are both fairy tale retellings. So I am very excited to talk about these. I love fairy tale retellings. It just in general, that's something I've discovered semi-recently within the past like 6 months to a year or so, that I just really truly love that fairy tale element, and having elements from favorite fairy tales of mine is wonderful, and I love it. So the first one that I want to mention is House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin Craig, and this one is a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, which I didn't know anything about 12 Dancing Princesses when I read this book. So this story does follow 12 sisters. It centers around, I think she is the 5th or 6th sister, Anna Lee, and her mother died giving birth to the 12th sister, and shortly after that one of the oldest sister dies, and then the next oldest dies, and then the next oldest dies. So by the time the story picks up at the very beginning, Anna Lee is at the funeral of the 4th sister. The people in the town think that there's a curse on this family because people keep dying, and Anna Lee is pretty sure there's something fishy going on with her last sister's death, but she has no idea what is happening, and she wants to investigate. So this story is a YA, so it definitely kind of has some of those romancy tropes. There's kind of a little bit of insta-love in here and some other things going on that are not my favorite, but I felt like this story was really well done. And honestly, I'm really picky about romance, but the romance didn't really bother me all that much. Like, it was a little cheesy in places, but not nearly as bad as a lot of YA that I've read. So I don't know if the story was so gripping to me that I didn't care, or if it was better written. I'm not really sure which one of those it is. But this story is a horror story, which I did not know that going into it. I thought it was more of like a mystery thriller type deal, but it is horror. It has some supernatural horror. It does have some gore in it, but it's not, I didn't think it was over the top. I'm one of those people who's really easily scared. So like a gothic type thriller, I'm totally fine with those, but like supernatural horror or like super gross, that like I can't do it. I am not like a Stephen King fan. I can't handle anything even close to that level. So though it is billed as a horror, I was fine with it. I think if it had gone a little bit farther, it would have been too much for me, but I really, really liked it. I think it did a really good job of balancing the creepy and intense moments with just like everyday life and other things that are happening, because these sisters they want to stop mourning for every sister that dies, because it goes into the religious system, which was really interesting. I like books that have some sort of like made up religious system. I always think that that's really fascinating. So their religion dictates that they have to be in mourning for a year. So they have to wear dark clothes. They can't go out. They can't see anybody. And so this is, you know, the 5th death within like the last 5 years, and so the cycle has just kept repeating. So you're alternating these things where Anna Lee's trying to figure out what's going on with these super creepy things happening, with like the sisters trying to get their life back and planning like this ball and trying to do these things and wanting to go out dancing and all these things. And so since it went back and forth so much, I felt like that really kind of broke up the tension a little bit and made it not quite as intense as it could have been, which I think for some people that might be a criticism, but for me personally, I liked that. I needed those little breaks in there. And then I just thought it was so well done. Any book that makes me question like how much of this is in this person's head or how much of this is really happening and how much is like, I really enjoy books that make me think like that. And the last book I want to share was a 5-star book. It's funny, out of these books that I'm sharing, not all of them are 5 stars because I think I gave House of Salt and Sorrow 4 stars. And I know that I didn't give We've Always Lived in the Castle 5 stars either. So I've had other 5 stars, but it's interesting because I'm kind of picking the books where after sitting on them for a while, they're the books that are still sitting, like that are still, I'm still thinking about and still going back to in my mind. So sometimes I rate a book 5 stars and I wouldn't necessarily change that because I did really enjoy it, but sometimes I'll write a book 4 stars and then I just can't stop thinking about it and I just keep going back to it. And so some of these books, House of Salt and Sorrows being one of them, was just is like that, where I didn't rate it 5 stars, but I just keep thinking about it and thinking how good it was and how much I enjoyed it. So the last book is another fairy tale retelling, and it's Stepsister by Jennifer Donnelly, and oh my word, this is like the pinnacle of perfection of fairy tale retelling for me. Like, so it is a Cinderella retelling, but it follows the ugly stepsisters instead of following Cinderella. So the book picks up right when the prince is going throughout the castle trying to try the slipper on each girl to see who it fits. So in the original fairy tale, the stepsisters actually cut off parts of their feet to make their feet fit in the slipper, and that's where the story begins. And obviously they're found out, and then Ella is whisked away to the palace with the prince, and it's all happy times for her, and here the stepsisters are, and here they're left, and it's coming out in the community like how they treated their stepsister, and so the community hates them. They want nothing to do with them. They're completely ostracizing and bullying them, and so we start getting some backstory into why the stepsisters are the way that they are. They weren't just mean for the sake of being mean, you know. I'm sure you've heard the phrase like hurting people hurt people, and so it kind of goes back into some of their history, which I really appreciated. And there was just so much social commentary in this book about how society prizes a beautiful woman over an intelligent woman, and I thought that that was really well done. There was just a lot of things in it, a lot of discussion that was so much more than a fairy tale. There was that, there was just kind of like, are you destined to only follow one path, or can you change your fate? Can you change who you are? Can you do something different? And I really liked that too. I just loved it in general because I thought it was the perfect blend of fairy tale and then enough of a twist to it, and then good like social commentary and the things that made me think and go like, oh yeah, that's really good. Like there was a lot of quotes I wrote down from it that I really enjoyed. And I just, yeah, there was this whole element too in regards to like being able to change your fate, where the fates from Greek mythology are there, and then Chance is like in the form of a man, and they're both kind of warring for the stepsister to try, like the fate wants to keep her on where she has already planned for her to go, and then Chance is trying to change the stepsister and change her mind so that way she doesn't have to be the way that she's always been. And so yeah, I really enjoyed this one. If you like fairy tale retellings, I think that you will absolutely love this one. And then I said I was only going to do 5, but I do want to give a shout out to The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer, because whew, that was just a really excellent spiritual book. So if you are a Christian and you have not read that book, I highly recommend it. I think that all Christians should read that book. It is just, he wrote it in the 40s and it feels like he could have written it last week. Like it's still so relevant to the American church and just, you know, westernized church in general, and how we do church and the things that we focus on, and we can prioritize different things over pursuing God himself. We go after all these other things, and it's a really short little book. It doesn't take that long to read, but it was very impactful and another book that I'm still chewing on and thinking about. So there you have it. There are my top 5 or 6 books of 2021 so far, the top 5 books of the first quarter. So I would love to hear from you in the comments. What have been some of your favorite books that you have read so far this year? Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe, and I will see you again next time.